Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordyn and welcome to today's video. I'm very excited to be ranking my top 10 Aardvark books of 2023. I did already post a very similar video ranking my top 10 book of the month books of the year. So if you haven't already checked that out, I will leave a link to it below. But I'm excited to be sharing some of my favorite books picked by these book subscription services because I've enjoyed being a member this entire year. I think it's such a fun way to be exposed to new books and new authors. I've enjoyed doing reading vlogs, sharing my thoughts of reading these books real time on camera. And in case you are an Aardvark member or you're considering becoming an Aardvark member, this list could potentially help you decide what to pick up next from your Aardvark stack, or decide to add on one of these books to a future box. Or of course you can pick up these books otherwise, from the library, from any other bookstore. A quick explanation, because Aardvark is a relatively new company. They started right at the end of 2022, but they are a book subscription box where they pick 5 main picks every month. If you are a member, you pay for a credit, and every month you can pick one of those 5 to be sent to you. And then after you pick one of the main picks, you can also add on any of the picks from that month or any month prior to buy for even cheaper. I have really enjoyed being a member of Aardvark this year because I'm loving their book selections. They are getting some pretty high buzz, big name authors and books as their picks, but also I think they do a really good job highlighting new authors and underhyped authors that I wouldn't hear about otherwise, and specifically in genres that I really enjoy. So I definitely am going to plan to continue being a member into 2024 and see what other awesome recommendations I can get from them in the future. A few kind of disclaimers about this list that I'm going to present to you. First things first, while these are all picks that have been picked by Aardvark in the past, some of them I read in other formats. Specifically, I think I had NetGalley ebook arcs for a couple of these, so I read them before they were released. One of them I still ended up picking up an Aardvark copy of. One of them I just got a copy of elsewhere. But again, this is to highlight all of the books that I have read and enjoyed that have been picks from Aardvark in the past. My other disclaimer is that the books picked for December, I don't know what they are yet. I'm actually recording this on November 30th. So I have not seen December's picks. I have obviously not read December's picks. So if I do end up reading any of them and loving any of them and they become favorites, I will actually just go ahead and include them on next year's list. So this is more specifically January through November, the top books of 2023. Now let's get into some statistics about the books that I've read from Aardvark. Out of the 56 books that they have had as main picks, side note, they don't do just add-on books like Book of the Month does. They only have main picks every month, and then those go into their entire collection. So the number of books they have every year is smaller. And out of those 56 books they've picked, I have read 21 of them, which is 38%, higher percentage than of my Book of the Month books. Again, due to Book of the Month having more only add-on options, means there are more books in total, so harder for me to have read a high percentage of them. Also, I've been lucky to work with Aardvark, and they have actually sent me a couple of their boxes where I got to read every single book that they picked in a couple of months. Specifically, it looks like they were February and June, but 38%, I'm pretty happy with that. I feel like that gives me a good grasp on the books and genres that they do select, and I can give generally good recommendations based off of that. I would have to really make an effort to hit more of a percentage than that. So 38%, over a third of their books. I think that's pretty good. As far as my ratings of the Aardvark books that I've read, 3 of them I DNF'd. I did give them a try, just decided they weren't for me. I had 0 1 stars, 3 2 stars, 9 3 stars, which is the biggest bucket, 5 4 stars, and actually only 1 5-star book. So again, this is interesting to kind of compare and contrast with Book of the Month, where I have found more 5-star books, so favorites for me. But overall, I do still feel like I really enjoy Aardvark's picks, and even getting a lot of 3 and 4-star books, while they may not be all-time favorite books, I still generally enjoyed almost everything I read from them this year, and enjoy that I can now have those as recommendations to give to other people, especially the ones that I wouldn't have known of otherwise. So with that, I guess let's go ahead and get into the top 10. My top 10 list is made up of a few 3-star books, some 4-star books, and then the one 5-star book is obviously my #1 recommendation. So a couple of the 3-star books I don't own physically anymore. I ended up unhauling them, selling them on Pango, just because I like to keep my shelves to mostly my favorite books. But that doesn't mean they can't be still recommendations. So in the number 10 spot, I'm putting Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This is a contemporary romance book that is very cutesy. It's a small town romance. It's technically the second book in a series, but it is truly a companion book in that you don't have to read the first book first. I actually didn't. So I went right into this book and was just fine in terms of my understanding. I did give this book 3 stars because it's not my perfect type of romance. I don't love small towns. I don't love cheesy cutesy type romance. This one I do remember being fairly closed door, so not very steamy if that's something you are particular about. I am still putting it on my list because I would still generally recommend it as a romance, and I know that a lot of people really did love this book this year, which tells me that if it's your thing, it's done well. You should give it a try. Again, I just gave it 3 stars because it wasn't perfect for me, but there was definitely nothing detracting from it either. My number 9 Aardvark book of this year is Cassandra in Reverse by Holly Smale. This is a contemporary book with a little bit of a sci-fi twist to it. It's about this main character named Cassandra whose life is really down in the dumps at the start of this book. She just got dumped and she just lost her job, and she does something to realize that she has the ability to go back into time a little bit. So she uses that to go back and try to correct her mistakes to change the outcome of her life. There were a lot of things that I really enjoyed about this book. First of all, the concept. I am a sucker for a light sci-fi book. And then I also did enjoy one particular reveal that came out of this book. I wasn't necessarily expecting for there to be a twist, but something did catch me off guard. It did ultimately land at a 3-star rating from me because I didn't have a strong emotional connection, or there wasn't a strong emotional impact from the book that I was hoping for. But if you are looking for a very light sci-fi book and that premise sounds interesting to you, I do think it is generally worth a read. My number 8 book to recommend is What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez by Claire Jimenez. This is a young adult kind of mystery book, also kind of just contemporary, about this family. It's a family full of women. There are, I think, 3 daughters, and the youngest is Ruthie, and when she's 13 years old, she goes missing. She was on her way either to or from school, was taking her route as usual, when all of a sudden she disappears. No one can trace her steps. No one knows where she went. 3 years go by and she's still missing, when all of a sudden one day one of the sisters is watching TV and sees a girl on a reality TV show that looks just like Ruthie. So then this family sets out to go find her, find out if it really is her, what had happened to Ruthie, and they're basically solving that mystery. Again, a lot of things I really enjoyed about this book. I did like the general plot and setup and the emotional impact of this family looking for the missing daughter. It's obviously a very emotional situation. I will say it was a little bit character driven for me. Finally, the plot kind of started to pick up at the end, but it was a little too late for me to raise my rating of the book. But if you like emotional character driven stories and think you would like to find out about this family, then I would absolutely recommend this book. All right, my next recommendation is my last 3-star book on this list. It's one that I've seen quite a bit of buzz about, Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. This is a dystopian type book. It's set slightly in the future in an America that has a prison system that has the inmates basically fight each other, like to the death, for a number of years, and if they continue winning, then they earn their freedom. Again, what an interesting concept. I knew I had to pick this book up as soon as I heard the synopsis of it. I really enjoyed the concept, and I really enjoyed the commentary on our prison system, both in this fictional world, but also that reflect on our real world. I found it a bit confusing because this book has a lot of characters, so if you're going to read it, I definitely recommend going in knowing you're gonna have to keep all of that straight. Not only the number of characters, but also the characters that are in this prison system. They have like their normal names and personas, and then they also have their basically gladiator names and personas for when they're fighting in the ring. So keeping that straight was also a little bit confusing for me, but ultimately I think it had important things to say, and I appreciate that. I'd highly recommend it to those it sounds interesting to. And again, hopefully knowing what you're getting into is a very meaty, complex story will put you in the right headspace to enjoy it even more than I did. All right, getting into 4-star books. A couple of these are fairly unexpected in that they are weird, fever dreamy type books. which are not normally my thing, but I am finding that Aardvark has a way of selecting this type of book that does end up working for me. So in my number 6 spot, I have Liar, Dreamer, Thief by Maria Dawn. This one has a strange setup that I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to pitch very well, but it's about this main character who's a woman who is kind of struggling in her life. She's just getting by. She goes to work and she has this coworker that she is basically obsessed with. She has a weird fascination with him. She thinks she has this weird, almost supernatural connection with him. One day she follows him after work and ends up seeing something that completely sends her into a tailspin and sets off the actions of this book. I know that that doesn't sound like much to go off of, and I don't even know how to accurately pitch this book to the right audience, but if you like mystery books that are maybe a little bit on the slow side, but have something about them that's a little bit darker and just makes you want to know what's going on and keep digging into these characters to find out, are they crazy or is the situation really that crazy? Like you're confused, but you're having fun. That's what this is. It is fever dreamy, which again is not something I typically enjoy, but maybe if you also don't typically enjoy that, this might be a way to try it out or a way to like it. I don't know. This is probably the worst book pitch ever. I will link the video where I read this book down below because maybe I have some more coherent thoughts to share more real time from when I read it, because it has been a while. But this one has just stuck with me as a book that has, you know, a little something special to it. So I did give it 4 stars, and I would recommend it if you are open to something a little bit darker and a little bit weird, but not too weird. Similarly, but also different, my number 5 book is Death Valley by Melissa Broder. This is about our main character, who is a woman again. She is staying at this hotel in California because her life is also in shambles. Apparently that's a trope I enjoy in books. She has a father who is in the hospital who's dying, and she has a husband who is unwell and is getting worse. She's not with either of them. She's by herself, but she's existentially grappling with all that her life is right now and also probably going to become in the near future as the health of those 2 men rapidly decline. She ends up going on a hike in the Californian desert. She finds this cactus that is supernatural, ? And she gets lost in this desert. And it's, again, just a fever dream of her experience. This one's maybe a little bit more realistic because you can ask the question of, is this preemptive grief messing with her mind? Is it like being out in the hot desert heat messing with her mind and making her hallucinate? There's some reasonable doubt you can give to it just being a weird magical book, but it also has a lot to say in terms of grief, like I mentioned. And yeah, it's quite short, but it packs a punch for how short it is. So if it sounds interesting to you, I would recommend it. I did give this one 4 stars. All right, my number 4 book, I would say this is the last of my weird books that I'm glad Aardvark introduced me to this year. It's Mr. Magic by Kiersten White. This one has a pretty fun setup. It's about this woman who I think is 38 years old. Don't know why that number sticks with me, but 30 years ago, she was a child star on a children's TV show called Mr. Magic. She was on it with a group of other kids. Something really bad happened that caused her dad to basically take her and bring her to an isolated ranch. That's where they've been living ever since. She hasn't seen any of her co-stars since then. She hasn't talked to anybody about the show. She actually has completely forgotten about the TV show and everything that happened to her. And at the start of this book, something happens that causes her coworkers to find her, and they basically bring her back into the situation to reconnect with her childhood friends, and they are kind of trying to solve whether or not Mr. Magic was real. Like literally the concept of Mr. Magic, the character in the show, and also the show itself. Within this book, it's a fun phenomenon of there's no record of this TV show. There's no clips of it online anywhere. Nobody can find any documentation about it, but everyone has this kind of collective memory of having watched it as a kid. So they're trying to figure out what was really going on with Mr. Magic. This was such a fun book to read, and that's honestly why I rated it so highly, is because I was hooked from the very first chapter and did not want to stop reading until I was done. Did the ending get a little bit crazy for my personal taste? Yes, but it was so much fun. So if you like fun books, if you're willing to go on a little ride, then I would recommend this one, and I would love to talk to anyone else who ends up reading this book about what you think of it. Okay, getting into my top 3 books. My next one is basically a domestic thriller, which is a genre I'm coming back more to love. I've always loved mystery thrillers, but domestic thrillers specifically have been hit or miss for me in the past. I've started dipping my toes back into it, and this next one is one that convinced me that I can still love them. It's The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding. I really liked this. It was really fun. Again, hooked me from the first chapter, and I didn't want to stop reading until I had finished. This is about a woman who is homeless at the start of this book. She's living out of her car. There are reasons for this. Basically, she's on the run from her previous life, has nowhere to go but doesn't want to be found. So she's living out of her car. She's sleeping in her car one night when she wakes up early in the morning to a woman trying to drown herself in the ocean. She ends up basically saving her. They strike up a conversation. They start to strike up a relationship together, as in a friendship, and it goes from there. I don't think you need to know too much more about the plot of this book. I think just going in with an open mind, ready for twists and turns. This book definitely has those. I thought it put some fun twists on common tropes that I see in thrillers, and specifically domestic thrillers. So maybe if you enjoy domestic thrillers but are tired of reading the exact same thing over and over again, this could be something fun that's a little bit different. Ultimately, I had a great time. I gave it 4 stars, and it's my number 3 favorite Aardvark book. All right, my number 2 book. This I gave 4 stars, but I could be convinced to raise it up to 4.5 or even 5 because it's definitely stuck with me, and it's definitely a book I would highly recommend basically to anyone who likes historical fiction. If you do like historical fiction, you've probably heard of this book and maybe even read it, but if you haven't, let me introduce you to The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. This is 1950s, I think set in 2 different places near the South, following 2 different Black women. One is a teenager in high school and one is a student in college. This book, of course, talks about racism in the 1950s, colorism, etc. It also deals with infertility and discussions of motherhood. So if those are topics that you enjoy, highly recommend this book. Super emotional, impactful, all the things you want out of historical fiction. I would recommend it to fans of Black Cake, Take My Hand, The Last House on the Street by Diane Chamberlain. All of those books, if you enjoyed any of them, you'll probably enjoy this one. It's just really good. So 4 stars, probably more like 4.5. My second favorite Aardvark book of this year, and definitely a favorite historical fiction for me of all time. All right, and then last but not least, we have my favorite Aardvark selection book of 2023. Ironically, I didn't get this one through Aardvark. I did have a NetGalley arc of it, so I read it early. I ended up just buying a copy for myself as soon as it released. But if you can get it through Aardvark as an add-on, would highly recommend. Again, maybe one that a lot of people have heard of, but let me sell it to you. Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. This is a dark, gothic thriller, is how it's pitched. Maybe more of a mystery. It follows these 2 characters who live in this southern religious town that's also kind of a swampland. So setting of Where the Crawdads Sing. One of the main characters is named Ruth. She is the preacher's daughter. She is having a lot of questions and resistance to the church and what basically this whole town believes. Also, she doesn't have many friends in this town because she's the preacher's daughter, and because everyone is basically scared of the preacher, scared of going to hell. They don't want to hang out with Ruth because they don't want her to tell on them. So she's kind of an outcast. The second main character is a boy named Everett, who is also an outcast in this town, but for basically opposite reasons, because he is the son of the town drunk. And Ruth and Everett end up striking up a friendship, bonding over their shared outcastness. So this book is about their relationship. It's a bit of a romance. It's also about what Ruth and Everett know about the town mystery, which starts when a human skull is pulled out of the swampland. We know from pretty early on that Ruth and Everett kind of know what's going on, and we work to solve the rest of that mystery in this book, but I just ate this book up. It felt like a combination of Where the Crawdads Sing, like I mentioned, with the setting and also the murder mystery element of it. A little bit of It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Stay with me if you're not a Colleen Hoover fan. That book also follows two characters looking to break the cycles of abuse that they come from, which Ruth and Everett are both trying to do. They have that in common. They both want a better life for themselves. They want to get out of this small religious town, and I really liked watching them come together over that. And then a little bit of The Burning Girls by CJ Tudor, which is also a thriller with religious undertones, really overtones. It's pretty specifically about religion, but also how like religion and lawfulness and morality all come together and their similarities and differences. Like what makes a person good or evil through the lens of religion compared to the law, compared to what a logical person would just think for humanity. All very interesting conversations that I love. Ruth is obsessed with Twilight, so if you like Twilight, I would also throw this recommendation to you. It was just fun, but also gave me a lot to think about. I love Ashley Winstead, and this is my favorite book by her to date, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and I would highly recommend. So those are my top 10 Aardvark books. Let me know if you have read any of the books that I mentioned and if you agree with my thoughts. Let me know if any of these are on your TBR or you're considering adding them to your TBR now. And if you're a member of Aardvark or you're familiar with their picks, let me know what your favorite picks have been by them this year. If you're interested in signing up, I do have a referral code, so I'll drop that in the description. But really, again, this is just an excuse for me to talk about some books at the end of this year that might not make it to my overall favorites list, but I still want to talk about, and then I'm glad I read through Aardvark. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else, so thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.